You're watching The Digital Lifestyle, your 24-hour source for Apple news and rumors.
Welcome back once again to Root Access, and today we're answering your questions. You know, we always accept them at root@thedigitallifestyle.tv. So let's jump back in. We've got a question from across the pond, as they say.
Okay.
Sean in the UK wants to know, is there any true advantage to an Apple display?
Well, certainly you're going to pay more for the Apple displays right now. There's a little premium price you're paying for it. You know, they look really nice. They match the whole Apple aesthetic. Mm-hmm. As far as the actual specs of the display and what you're getting, I mean, right now, for a while, I think that Apple was ahead of the curve.
Right.
But I think everyone has caught up. Right. Particularly Dell.
You hear a lot about the Dell monitors, especially for a lot lower price point. The
lower price point, and now I have a lot of better features in even built-in webcam, more connections, HDMI input, component input. And I believe a lot of the monitors come with a 3-year warranty, which Apple displays still come with a 1-year warranty. You can buy AppleCare for them, right? But the Dell's giving you 3 years right out of the box, which is nice.
Right. Well, that's one thing to touch on, is if you are on the fence about whether to get the Apple display or not, I would say decide before you buy the computer.
Yeah.
Because with AppleCare, the monitor will be covered when you buy it with the computer, so it makes sense to come to that decision. Now, I believe now you can buy monitor.
I think it's $100. Yep.
But if you buy it with the computer, it'll still be covered. Now, the other thing is, as you said, Apple's kind of. I think the specs of the actual screen, they're still probably in the top third.
Yeah.
The prices have come down a lot since they were first introduced, but relative to everyone else, there is still that premium. It's not like there's any kind of setup with a monitor.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, can you think of any advantages with having it be LED backlit versus traditional backlit screen?
Well, I mean, I think their standalone displays are still the original. They're not LED. They're just the tube, or I'm not sure the technology used to
the fluorescent.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you don't really have a choice there. I mean, I think Apple really needs to upgrade the displays at some point. I mean, they're still missing EyeSight, which would make sense since you can't buy a standalone EyeSight camera anymore.
Right.
They're kind of a little long in the tooth, in my opinion. I would honestly, if you're buying a Mac Pro Tower or a Mac Mini, it might make sense to shop around for a third-party monitor.
Especially with a Mac Mini.
Yeah.
If you're buying a Mac Mini, I mean, obviously there's a little bit of value concern. You're trying to save money, and we should review those Dell monitors sometime. There are some really good monitors from them that are a fraction of the cost. Now, although a lot of owning an Apple, let's say you're in a creative or design shop, is the aesthetic and the presentation of a Mac shop. And obviously, if you just have a tower stuck under the desk somewhere, so you kind of have to think about intangibles like that and whether that's really worth it. Maybe in a pro setting it is. Maybe at home you don't really care. Personally, I don't use an Apple monitor.
Yeah, neither do I.
So there you go, for what it's worth. If you want to be like us, that's what you've got to do. And the other thing about the Apple monitors, you never know what kind of connection it's going to be at any given time. Now it's back to DVI.
Yeah, from ADC, and now there's the whole DisplayPort. It's a new connection coming out, HDMI. So we'll have to see where all those connections go in the future, but it looks like, I'm sure Apple will adopt whatever the standard is,
Unless they make their own connector again, because they also like having like the USB and FireWire all in one cable. So you never know. And by the way, those monitors do work with PCs, we should say.
They do, yep.
It used to be when like the 30-inch first came out, it could be hard to find a graphics card that would drive it. But I think now just about any PC will be fine with that. Okay, another question. Paul in Cincinnati asks, I'm new to the Apple world. What is it about an iPod that actually makes it a better MP3 player? Good question.
Well, I mean, especially if you're a Mac user at this point, there isn't a huge amount of alternatives to using the iPod, which
certainly not with the same simplicity.
Yeah, which is fine. I mean, that was the real selling point of the iPod from the beginning. Is it's integrated well with the software. iTunes and the iPod work well together. The menu of the iPod and the click wheel made it very easy to navigate through your songs. I think The iPod Touch now adds a lot of features that aren't found on any device of that size. Web browsing, scrolling through your pictures and music, email now. So there is advantage using the iPod. If you're a PC user, there is a lot of choice out there. So you might not want to get locked into the Apple sort of ecosystem, if you don't feel like you're ever going to buy songs off of iTunes, or you don't want to browse the web, or you want an iPod that allows you to put other formats on that aren't supported, then it might make sense to go in a different direction.
But once you get the iPod, it's kind of like buying something from IKEA. That then you start to, you're in that system, and kind of everything is in there. Yeah,
there's a ton of accessories, which is nice, cases and what have you. So
it can be hard to find a good speaker system with a Zune dock.
There's a few out there, but yeah.
Your choices are definitely limited. So I would say hardware-wise, as far as the actual components at this point, I don't think there's a ton of difference between, say, a Zune and an iPod. Innovation-wise, yes, on the Touch you have
the Touch is definitely ahead of everything else. I think as far as like the Classic and the Nano iPod, I think things like the Zune have sort of caught up to it. They're at least on par. And maybe they're passing the iPod in some regards, but still the Touch is ahead of everybody.
Plus, Paul, the other thing I would say to consider is, are you buying this strictly as a music device, or do you want to get into, buying TV shows or video podcasts, or even renting movies now? So I would say, as much as this sounds like an Apple company line, it's not an MP3 player. It's much more than that, and you just have to decide whether you really need much more than that, or whether you're happy to just have some flash-based player that you drag and drop 100 songs on, and you're good to go. Speaking of good to go, we're good to go until the next segment, so stay tuned. It's Root Access.